if you could put the agenda on the screen. Thank you, Amanda. All right. I'd like to do a call to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Paige Anthony.
Here, aye.
Thank you, Paige. We know that Ms. Bright, Ms. Dickinson, and Ms. Clement will be absent today. Mr. Kepler.
Here.
Ms. Shao.
Here.
Did I say your last name correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And Mr. Stevie, we know, is also absent. So we have quorum, Mr. Chair.
All right. Agenda item number 2 would be to approve the prior meeting minutes. And there it is on the screen. Oh, that's not the meeting minutes that's our agenda on the screen. But to review the meeting, is there a motion to approve our meeting minutes from, I think it's 2 weeks ago?
It was Friday, September 16th.
Oh, yeah, a little bit more than 2 weeks ago. Right, and that is the minutes on the screen. I motion that we approve these minutes.
I will second it.
Thank you. I'll call for a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Now we'll go to our agenda item, which is call to the audience. And if you're in the audience, if you could just raise your hand, and then we'll get like an idea of how many hands are up. Possibly.
We had
2 hands are up, 3, 4 hands up. Okay, I think we have 4. Go ahead,
if you
Amanda.
don't mind, Mr. Kepler, excuse me, I would like to just remind the DRB and the audience members that this is not a public hearing, and that the DRB will need to stay within purview, and that it's up to the DRB to allow speakers, which you are prepared to do.
Yeah, now only 2 hands are up. But anyways.
If the speakers, excuse me, Mr. Chair, if the speakers could remember to state their name and address for the record, we would appreciate it.
Yeah, and just in case we get any kind of filibuster type stuff, I'd like to keep it to 2 minutes if that's at all possible for the audience. So the first person who's up is, it looks like it's Steve Dolan. Would you state your full name and address and your comment, please?
Yes, I'm Steve Dolan. I live at 4154 North Tortolita Mountain in the Tucson Mountains. And as you mentioned, this is not a public meeting, but public input is very important. A nice cool morning to everyone. I'll conclude with the existing substation and start with tragedies. The Jackson, Mississippi water treatment plant is flooded, and the critical facility cannot operate to deliver drinkable water to businesses and residents. Florida Hurricane Ida is a record-breaking storm called a 500-year flood. I am a retired U of A hydrologist, saddened by the recent shooting death of Professor Thomas Meixner. And last, a future record-breaking flood on the Santa Cruz River overtops and erodes the banks at the TEP Cottonwood substation that cannot operate, creating power outage to businesses and residents that may cause death to elderly people who rely on 24/7 power to medical equipment. I spoke at the first DRB meeting to oppose the critical facility substation at this dangerous location along the Santa Cruz River. I am on the Tucson Mountains Association board and provided 2 opposition letters, 7 maps, and the critical facility definition. At the September 16th meeting, the zoning administrator called the DRB experts to interpret codes such as, is this TEP substation keeping in character and compatible with surrounding neighborhoods? For 22 years, I have been a national certified floodplain manager, a flood expert who explained why this critical facility is at the wrong site. Maps show this dangerous location, a no-brainer for floodplain professionals. TEP had over 3 years to look at other sites that are safer. The bank of this site is next to FEMA mapped 100-year floodplain and floodway, plus there's 500-year floodplain on the parcel. Obvious on the maps provided is the erosion. I provided these maps, and this is the curve right to the site. And the maps there were also historical maps that showed the erosion and flood history to this site, where the Santa Cruz River meandered for decades. A critical facility must be protected to the 500-year level so it can operate during a flood emergency. A most important and other contributing design feature not discussed at the first DRB meeting is adequate bank protection not shown on any TEP plans presented to the DRB. Adequate bank protection must be designed for floodway or 500-year velocities and be constructed above the 500-year water surface to protect a critical facility. In October and November 2021, I spoke to the DRB and opposed the TEP variance request to not underground utilities. The DRB voted to allow the variance with mitigation conditions that were ignored by the City Board of Adjustment. TEP needed a variance to the city floodplain ordinance at this location. The DRB should find this project not in compliance to send a strong message to the zoning examiner. Floodplain variances are rare nationwide because they put a use in harm's way. The TEP floodplain variance had flawed engineering of a straight section. This substation is within the 1,230-foot erosion hazard setback for a curve, as shown on the topographic maps I just showed you and provided to the DRB. The proposed TEP substation is in harm's way. This is probably the most dangerous site along the Santa Cruz River. For 12 miles, this is the only location with no soil cement bank protection. Pima County Flood Control, Army Corps of Engineers purposely did not soil cement the banks because the river naturally widens here. It is now the Paseo de las Iglesias restoration area for riparian plants and wildlife. Most special exception requests to the DRB are to upgrade existing small utilities, not for new large-scale systems. In the first DRB meeting, the DRB requested more details for TEP for all improvements. For comparison, I visited the existing substation at 36 and Quino, a smaller 5-acre site that has 12 very tall poles. This Cottonwood 10-acre site will have more poles to impact views in all directions. It is not an improvement. This critical facility substation commercial type use is out of scale, not in character with residents or Paseo de las Iglesias. TEP has not mitigated the erosion and flooding to the site and cannot mitigate the impacts to neighbors per the UDC. A substation would not be special, it would be a dangerous exception. The TEP project is not in compliance. Thank you and have a good day.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Steve. I'll let that one go a little bit longer than 2 minutes. Does someone else want to read a comment?
I do.
Okay. Can you keep it to 2 minutes and please state your name and address for the record, please?
Thank you. My name is Beryl Baker. I reside at 2723 South Mission, and I'm a co-facilitator for the Santa Cruz Southwest Neighborhood Association, which borders this area.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
We want to thank you for taking our neighborhood concerns seriously at the September 15th, 2022 meeting. We appreciate that you are seeking more information to see if this TEP project is compatible with the neighborhood. Our research and answers we have found continue to point out that this project is not in compliance, in keeping with the character of the zone in which it is located. Also, as we said before, a multi-use connection with the west branch of the Santa Cruz River is not in the best interest of either the neighborhood or the west branch itself. The project itself is not in keeping with the intent of this portion of the Santa Cruz River to remain as natural as possible watercourse for plant and riparian life restoration. This concept was developed the concept of the Santa Cruz River was developed and implemented over years of planning and neighborhood meetings with Pima County and other government agencies. We also have grave concerns about how the waters from this site would be handled, as well as how those waters will intersect with the Santa Cruz. This area historically has had flood forces affect its location. It appears this portion of the Santa Cruz was not intended to be bank protected by or through the county plan, or would have been included as such when the river was restructured. We hope that your findings will support our concerns that this project is not in compliance with the zoning and infrastructure of this area. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Thank you. Appreciate the comment. Anyone else in the audience? And Steve, your hand is still up, but anyone else in the audience want to make a comment? Thanks, Steve. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is our case. And I would like to just ask for the staff, the quick staff update on it. And we will then turn it over to the applicant to present further information to us. And then the DRB members will discuss our purview. So go ahead, Amanda, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Kepler. We have invited Lena Perrell, the lead planner with the entitlement section, to introduce the case.
Good morning. So this is for case number DRB 2211 or SE 2235, new TEP Cottonwood Substation. The project was reviewed by DRB on September 16th, 2022, and requested the applicant to return to the DRB with the following: rendered information of screening wall and gates depicting signage, elements that will be visible along the wall height, colors and materials. 2, screening wall to provide additional articulation and or scaling of elements to bring it more into conformance with a residential scale or human scale. 3, information on all existing components and proposed improvements in and around the site, including poles, transmission lines, driveways, grading. 4, cross sections in the east and west direction and in the north and south direction, articulating heights of walls and surrounding grades in relation to the neighborhood and of the Santa Cruz River. And 5, information showing how the substation cannot be reduced with safety offsets for proposed equipment and potential expansion areas. Again, the applicant's request. This is a request by Brian Pugh of the Environmental and Land Use Planner at Tucson Electric Power on behalf of the property owner, TEP, to allow for construction of a new 138 kilovolt electric power substation as a special exception land use in a former 10.7 acre aggregate mine and material sorting facility in R1 and R2 residential zones. This proposal includes a new multi-use connection of the Paseo de la Iglesias River Park to the west branch of the Santa Cruz River. Distribution system uses in the R1 and R2 zones are subject to sections 4.911A1, 2, 5, 8, 9, and 11 of the Unified Development Code and requires approval through a zoning examiner special exception procedure, section 3.43, as well as review by the Design Review Board. This item is scheduled for a zoning examiner public hearing on October 20th, 2022. A reminder about the DRB's purview for this case. So in accordance with UDC section 4.911A8, use specific standards, utility use group distribution system, DRB's purview is any building housing such facility shall be in keeping with the character of the zone in which it's located. The Design Review Board shall review all applications and make recommendations to the zoning examiner. The DRB shall review architectural style, building elevations, materials on exterior facades, color schemes, new mechanical equipment locations, light of outdoor areas, window locations and types, screening, landscaping, vehicular use areas, and other contributing design features. All materials that have been submitted to the DRB from the public will be forwarded to the zoning examiner for the zoning examiner hearing on the 20th. Again, just a reminder to keep with the purview. Any thing that's not kind of related to the purview can be brought up in the zoning examiner hearing. If the ZRB wants to add additional comments, you're welcome to, but the recommendation should be within the purview. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Elena. And any comments before we turn it over to the applicant about what we're about to review, Paige or Grace? Okay, in that case, is there someone or someones from the applicant that would like to present with, in the areas of 1 through 5?
Yes, Chair Capra, this is Brian Pugh. I am the Environmental Land Use Planner Supervisor for Tucson Electric Power. Do you mind if I share my screen?
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Let's see, wrong screen. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
All right. So good morning. Like I said, my name is Brian Pugh. I'm from Tucson Electric Power, and we have other team members on the call with us. We have Amanda Wittenborn, who is our engineering project manager for the substation. We have Miranda Jackson, who is our civil transmission engineer for the substation. We have Regina Beam from the civil engineer consultant from Somas Engineering. And we have Scott Martinez, the landscape architect from McGann. So we're going to basically go through the 5 items that were put in the motion last week. From what we sent out on Friday, we've kind of moved slides 15 to 22 up to the front for kind of presentation flow and brevity to basically address those, and they work better in the way that we're going to present the information. The first 2, we're going to address that existing residential character, and then look at a couple of substations we have in operations that we've constructed in the last 2 years that are in the R1 zone to show that compliance. And then we'll go through that preliminary development plan rendering to show the locations of the drop-ins. Scott will then discuss those and how that basically relates to the landscape plan. Then we'll kind of look at some of these unscreened substation equipment of the 2 that we built recently to look at that signage. And then we'll also present the sign standard so you can see what basically we're required to present on every substation for safety by OSHA. Then we'll go through the cross section that we're asked for, showing basically the location of the mobile home park all the way to the other sides of the Santa Cruz. We've got 3 sections that we can discuss. Then we went into the exterior wall design. We'll look at the vertical elements that we are proposing could be added to it, not the final design, but what we could actually, we could definitely, as we go through and finish that design, we can add to it to add those vertical elements. And then we're going to look at the visual simulations that we presented last week with some additions of the wall rendering to look at existing conditions and what we're proposing to show that the improvement of the character of that zoning district is greatly improved, not only in the aesthetic, but in the physical security of the actual character of the actual location. So as DRB members probably, were able to go out to the site this week, as I did, this is the existing character of the location. The residential character literally is non-existent. So we have a security wall for the mobile home park with the concertina razor wire on top, and all of the actual facilities, actually the homes themselves have actually turned their back and actually have planted landscape elements behind them so they can't see it, as this was an operating mine for 40 years. You can see the actual, what will be removed in the right of way, which is the invasive buffalo grass with all, unkept and uncared for. And then basically as you move down towards the substation, this is a storage unit, basic area for all the RVs for the tenants of the actual mobile home park. And at the end, you see the actual end of where you hit 44th Street, what ends up down to the private lane for there's only one actual residence that's down about a half mile down, which goes past the closed Cottonwood landfill the city operated in the 40s to the 70s, where they're basically measuring the methane release from it. So this is a site that in a context and there's one residence back here at the Chapins, who have also turned their back to the site. So there hasn't been any real residential character here for the last 50, 60 years. So that's basically what we had when we found the brownfield, that we could actually put the substation where the load was necessary. So as we move through and look at some of the additions we've done on other substations, would you look at Harrison? This is off of Harrison and Speedway. This is on the northern side. So basically this is just after the planting, and this is the condition we have right now we'll look at Keno, that the quality, the height of all of the landscape materials that are available right now are fairly small just due to the volume that the growers are having to deal with. But you see the distribution of the signage, which is necessary. We have the security camera, which was talked about, which is non-existent within the framework but it also adds a lot of security value to the location, as if there are any crimes that happen in the location, the Tucson Police Department relies on TEP for our security footage, and we give it to them whenever it's asked. But this is, basically the service back of this part of this neighborhood. Trash pickup, utilities cleanup, that's, the brush and bulky pickup, that's what's going on here. So as this array of trees grows, it will actually really basically hide the location itself. Here's from the south western side, showing the detention basin that was added. There was actually just a wash that went through there, and then the plantings that are going to be coming up. Again, same with the service, the road there, and then you can see the signage that we'll talk about a little bit later. Security camera, that's what we looked at earlier, and this is again fits within a character of the existing landscape. You can see the low houses here and the views going to the Catalinas. This is the Keno substation that was built on Keno in 36. This is on a gateway corridor. This is right after the plantings were done in 2000, before it was in operation. This is 2 years later. So you can basically see, this is the relationship that it has to the gateway, and it completely conforms to it and adds a lot of value to that. You can see the actual on the crossing, you see the safety devices that are put here for pedestrians when they're crossing. These facilities are unmanned. So the only the technicians that go in there are there once or maybe twice a week or a month, only because to go in and check on the equipment. So it's not something that's, we have people parking or going in there every day. And again, just kind of looking at the character of the light posts, the character of the light mass, they're the same finish. It's a brushed galvanization, which is like any other city street in Tucson. And then as we move into we'll let Scott go on to the finish up on the PDP. But the one thing that was brought up is like, why do you need so much space around the energized equipment? Well, this side of the south side is due to the fact that we need to have the ability to pull in mobile transformers in the event that we have a failure of equipment to continue to have reliable service. Those transformers are on a trailer that's 130 feet long. So they'll be backed in this location and connect to the actual bus here and connect here. So this is basically allowing for that space. On that eastern side, as you see, we don't have parking anywhere else on the site. As the trucks come in, they need to be able to park and be able to service the line and any of the substation equipment. And so that's basically for all the 5 or 6 trucks that have to come in when they're actually doing work on the substation. Similarly, on the north side, same thing. And then basically going around, that's just access around the energized equipment to be able to move around the substation to either service the PDC, which is where all the switches are, and to be able to get out and exit the site. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Martinez so he can talk about some of the other elements that we added for the landscape.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Design Review Board, and to the people in the audience. Thank you for your time this morning. Just like to say my name is Scott Martinez, landscape architect with McGann Associates. We'll talk about the landscape features and the overall site. And some of the things that were brought up in the last time was there was a less density of planting on the west or the east side of the project, which it's the arrow that points to Security Access Road, that there's a basin beyond the wall there, water harvesting basin, which we're able to you know, collect a runoff from the site and drain into those basins. And also the question was, you know, why is there less dense planting in that area? But as you could see, previously we didn't have the two drop-in structures or poles that are there. So we need to provide space and a buffer for TEP to access those lines in the case of maintenance operations. On the excuse me, the perimeter of the site has our landscape borders required by code. We are doing buffers along all sides of the project. I don't believe they're required adjacent to the Santa Cruz River Park, but we have them on all other sides. The multi-use path that we have here is connecting the Santa Cruz River to the west branch of the Santa Cruz River, and it runs along Cottonwood Lane, and it connects up to the site and along the west edge of the site where we have added or showing some crossings of the driveways that enter into the TEP site so that there's some warning and caution. Even though they're not accessed very frequently, that was a request to have some sort of warning and or detectable strips so that we know that there's a traffic crossing. So there's 2 of those added, and that connects to the north to the west branch connection that extends on towards up to Mission Road. In the little key map above, you can see that we are extending from our site south to an existing path located along the river path. This picture shows that connection. There's a decomposed granite path through here that and those 2 bollards in the middle that are open. That's the existing access to the Santa Cruz. It is level with Cottonwood Lane. As the site goes to the north, it slopes downward along with the sort of the slope of the Santa Cruz River. So our site is a little bit lower at this point. So there's no elevation change between our new connection to the Santa Cruz River Park path. So that's that. In these slides, you'll see some examples of things that were asked the last time is what do the cameras look like? What do the gates look like? And these are examples of it that Brian was showing previously that show the gate configuration. These walls are 12 feet tall. It also shows the signage. Those are required every 50 feet. And those are, we'll have another slide coming up that talks about the safety standards for those. But you can see that is nice architectural design features. The walls are split face, and we are using vegetation to screen the substation throughout all sides of the project. So some of these are early on photos, so the vegetation isn't quite grown up, but I think it helps. Also, you could show the equipment behind is mostly screened in all the photos. So next. Also, last time we also were asked to look at some of the grades and elevations of the site. So we've added 3 cross sections, 2 going east and west, 1 on the north side, 2 on the south side, and the 3rd section runs north and south. So just kind of get you, just kind of take a picture of this in your mind just to know where section 1, 2, and 3 are. And then the next slide will show those. So the first slide the first section number 1 is going east-west. It is at the north side, and you can see on the left of your screen, there is the existing fence, and that's sort of the mobile home parking area at the beginning. Then we go across Cottonwood Lane, the 60-foot right-of-way. We have some water harvesting that we're doing in our landscape buffer yards next to the project. Then we have a 12-foot tall security wall, and there is also a 20-foot wide perimeter security access road that runs around the property. Then we get to our substation equipment with the masts, and these are all in scale to what will be proposed on the site. Number 2, the keynote 2, is the H frame that will be used to connect power to the existing transmission lines that are running along the Santa Cruz. Then we see we have an 148-foot buffer space between the bank protection and the existing wall. So next to that, there's an existing tower that you'll see in the simulations, but that's going to be removed and replaced with 2 large poles that will be used to draw power into the substation. And then from there we go, that was asked to see, well, where's the river at in relation to this? So I believe that get my bearings here. So the west side of the Santa Cruz is kind of, or at least the existing shared use path along there is shown. And then there's quite a bit of a break. We would have run off to the page, but in order to help, you visualize this, the east side of the Santa Cruz River is 657 feet from the existing path. So it's quite a bit of ways. So, but that was a request from the DRB last time. Section number 2 below is taken further south of the site, running east and west. It shows the mobile home locations on the left side, and again, we go through Cottonwood Lane, the substation equipment. It shows the drop-in structures more in the background, and the buffer at this point is around 100 feet, and so very similar, but just gives you sort of a line. You'll see that the site is very flat in terms of this property, and then drops down towards the Santa Cruz River. Also, I guess I need to point out that the rock line bank protection has been added along that slope. There is some existing bank or riprap along that slope now that's going to be replaced and with new protection. So, yeah, the last section at the bottom runs north-south, and starting on the left is towards the south end of the project, where it crosses Cottonwood Lane, and then the property line, I guess if you can imagine that long access road that comes into the site, there's quite a bit, 350 feet is where the wall starts from there. Then the substation equipment, and these number 1s are the static masts that are required that Brian was pointing out earlier. And then to the very north side, there's 72 feet between the next property and the new perimeter wall. So next, we talked about the signage. So these signs are required every 25 feet. They're required by OSHA to protect people, and we could spend some time looking at these, but just to show you what those would look like, what was asked, what are the signs going to look like, and where are they going to be placed. So the next slide shows where they would be on the wall. So they're required every 40 to 50 feet. And this is the exact sort of scale and size of the signs would be placed. They need to be 5 foot above the wall grade. So those are shown at 5 feet. And the other request from the DRB at the last meeting was our wall design that we showed previously was similar to the ones that Brian showed in his example photos at Harrison. There's a very long, expansive wall on this project on the east side, along the Santa Cruz side of the project, and there was a request to ask, what can we do to provide some articulation and help break up sort of a long, monotonous, sort of plain wall with a single band through it. So we added some vertical elements, different colors of integral split face block, and it's sort of grounded by a different color of masonry at the bottom. So I think with the added column features, that helps to break up, provide some articulation, and then the vertical bands help to give it a little more scale and not be so monotonous along the project. So next slide. These are the same visual simulations we provided last time. We just added the new wall, and you show a bicyclist in the bottom right. It kind of shows you the scale of the size of that wall and the proposed colors what we're looking at. In this slide, we've updated the wall and to show the new sort of pattern and layout. Another comment that was asked was the vertical features in the previous simulation weren't entirely accurate because we didn't have the exact locations at the time. This is the same photo. You can see there's an existing tower on the left-hand side of this photo. That's going to remain. The tower on the north side, we're going to replace with 2 poles, is actually sort of hidden behind these trees in this photo. So it wasn't done not intentionally, but you could see kind of peeking through the tree on the right and the bottom photo where those drop-in poles would be. And the H-frames have been added, and those would be where the lines would drop into the site. Last request, I think, on the Sims was to provide a perspective from the east bank of the Santa Cruz. So this is looking from, I think, 600 or 700 feet away on the path that follows the east bank of the Santa Cruz, looking at the site. The top photo shows the 2 existing towers, sort of, that's kind of the project area. A bit north of the southern tower is where our project starts. The tower on the right will be removed and replaced as shown in the bottom photo. So those are approximate heights. And I also want to just point out in the top photo, it's very difficult to see the power lines. And that's going to be the same situation once the substation is built. The bottom, we've added those in our simulation just so you know where they're going to be. But as you can tell, in real life, they're going to be hard to see. At least the lines will be. And then I guess in this one, we could point out the wall, but you could see the things of that. This next simulation shows a new perspective. We were asked to take a photo closer to where we would be looking up at the site from the Santa Cruz, the Paseo de las Iglesias River Park path. There was very densely planted, so there was just a few areas where we were actually able to see and peek in through the path to see the site. The top photo shows the existing tower, and there's some existing sort of riprap rubble that's protecting the bank currently, or not the bank, but the slope to the property. And the bottom photo shows the new poles will be similar height. I think they're maybe a little bit shorter, and they'll be adding 2 of those with the drop-in structures. In the bottom part of the photo, you'll see the new bank protection, and so that's kind of what and then again, the photo on the top shows what the real actual power lines look like, and then the bottom is more of just sort of what was mapped in the simulation model. So.
Hey, thanks, Scott.
Yep.
Just in closing, I just want 3 points to review based off the 5 that we've addressed. The project will improve the physical and aesthetic character of the site based on what it's looked like over the last 40 years. And it's going to improve the physical security for residents of the mobile home park, as that's their main concern based on, what's actually physically in existence. And then mainly, it's the project will improve the electrical reliability for residents and for the system itself. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Scott. Comments from the DRB or questions on on the presentation we just heard?
I have some questions. First, I want to say thank you to everyone for the presentation, as well as the guests and their comments. And also apologize again for keeping you all waiting to reach quorum. As far as the renderings go, I was wondering about the color of the poles. They show the drop-in poles being that Corten steel color, and I'm wondering if that is that the standard within the Santa Cruz River? And I'm asking because my understanding is that white poles actually disappear more visually into the background. And I know we're all used to seeing these Corten steel poles around our city, and they're very monolithic and visible. So I just wanted to bring up the color of the poles, because I think when you look at the existing pole, that's the metal frame, it does disappear more into the background. And my understanding is there's been studies on this, and that white poles can be a little bit less obtrusive in the landscape.
Hey, thank you, Paige. No, there is no standard. You know, that's a transmission pole, so they're basically, the jurisdiction is with the ACC. And during a line siding case, which this one does not have one because we're shorter than 3 spans dropping in, which is why this site is also very appealing, that we didn't have to do a 2-year process and go and, you know, basically put a line siding case through that neighborhood to find us a location. But there's not a standard, and it's changed over the years. And that's basically where when they do visual simulations or visual impact, that's at that line siding. That's it, you know, at that line siding with the ACC. And for our standard, those are basically what is the most durable, and Miranda can speak to this too, durable actual piece of equipment for us. And you know, those lattice structures are, I think they're 55 years old. But that was the standard of galvanization was, so you didn't have to go and repaint them. We have painted poles along the line in different locations along the Santa Cruz, but they also have to then be replaced or repaired due to the fact that they lose the integrity of the paint and the basic decomposition of the metal. And so we're doing that in another location south of this line on the Santa Cruz for that very reason, because they were painted. But that is taken into consideration, but it's taken into consideration at the line siding phase.
I'm wondering if it's within our purview to specify color of the poles, Nathan, or someone.
Well, I was going to visit our purview. So hang on to that question page and let's look at that purview together. I wondered if the applicant could comment. We heard from the public a lot about flood control and flood zoning and conflict or dangers there. And I want to know what kind of studies or assurances TEP has about the site in that regard. If you could comment on that, Brian.
You bet. Back in 2019, when we basically started looking and identified this parcel, we went through, we basically engaged the city and basically the engineering department. In the end, we went through a year-long process because this site had been engineered and modeled by the flood control district when they built the Paseo de las Iglesias. So they added bank protection where it was necessary, how they modeled it. So we basically went and sat down with the flood control district back in the beginning of end of 19 and beginning of 2020, and we basically looked at their modeling. You know, how was it done? Is the site viable? You know, would we have to do bank protection all the way, or we do the 100-year, what we're proposing, basically? And we basically hired their firm, which was Somas, to do the actual hydrologic modeling. And we also hired J.E. Fuller, and they did the actual, also added to that model. That was all put together in a package for a variance for the erosion hazard setback. And that's where the individual was speaking to the details, what happened with that. That went through an extensive modeling process, and then it was visited and reviewed by the STAC, which is the Stormwater Technical Advisory Committee that the city has appointed. These are all working professionals, hydrologists in the field that actually then reviewed all of the information that came through the modeling, and are, basically what we basically asked was, to remove the erosion hazard setback from 490 feet to 230. After reviewing all of that, it went to the floodplain committee with the city. They then proposed that to the mayor and council based on that they proposed that was actually acceptable. And mayor and council on March 22nd approved it. So it's gone through a 2-year process, extensive process that mayor and council approved back in March. So we are confident that yes, with the modeling and the engineering that we're going to supply, this site is very safe. It will be a foot above the 500-year, as all critical infrastructure is. And that was all addressed back in March, and also is being addressed in the development plan review.
Okay, thank you for for that response there.
Excuse me, I'll clarify. During mayor and council, there were no flood questions, and the stack questions were never answered by mayor and council, and the previous floodplain administrator, his questions to TEP were never answered. So there were.
Hey, Steve,
That's-
you're somewhat out of order here. I don't want to
Thank you,
get into
Chair.
a debate.
I understand, but that 2-year process was less than a 10-minute process at mayor and council. So there were
Okay.
many stack and other questions never answered.
I want to turn now, unless Grace, you have a question about the presentation before we turn to our purview.
No,
Okay.
purview.
Amanda, if you could put the purview paragraph up. I noticed something in this purview that's going to give us some direction. The purview of the DRB is to review. What we have in front of us is a special use. Okay, our purview is not the use. It is special, and nobody is going to be able to demonstrate that the use is keeping in character with the neighborhood, because none of the neighbors are operating a power utility. There's no neighbors with a substation in their backyard. We are not evaluating the use. We are evaluating the housing of any such facility. So our purview isn't that powerful. Our purview is to look at how are they housing this use. And that is very, more mundane. It's walls and landscapes and paths and paint colors and gates and lights and things like that. Housing just means the enclosure. In this case, it's not a house. It's how are we enclosing the special use? So what I would ask the DRB in their consideration of a motion is to stick to our job description, which is to evaluate the housing of such facility. It should be in keeping with the character of the zone, which is residential. The design review board shall review all the applications and make recommendations to the zoning examiner. So we are not making a ruling, we're making a recommendation. We're providing input to the zoning examiner. Presumably they take our recommendation very serious. And I think we're sort of like a gatekeeper. We pick up on some of these things to make the zoning examiner's job a little bit easier. The DRB shall review the architectural style. So again, walls, landscape, building elevations, and we asked for further elevations, and we saw sections that were very helpful, and we saw renderings that are helpful to illustrate the conditions they're proposing. We evaluate the materials on the exterior facades, which again is walls and landscape, the color schemes of the housing. So Paige, you asked the question, do we get to choose the color of the poles? If you can consider the poles housing, but I don't believe those poles are housing. So I feel like they might fall out of our limited purview here. The new mechanical equipment locations, the light of outdoor areas, windows, locations and types, there are no windows. Screening is the wall and some landscaping. The vehicular use areas, there's a driveway that goes around it, and other contributing design features. So I think it's helpful for a review board to keep in mind that we have a small purview here, but let's do that purview to the best of our ability. questions on our purview from the design review board?
One could say that the poles are part of the contributing design features.
Is it a contributing design feature of the housing of a facility? Because
No.
the first part of our purview is to review any building housing.
Yeah.
And then it's clarified
Right.
in the following. Now, I do also want to say that I don't think the DRB has any remedy or any ability to comment on the safety in its proximity to the flood zone. I was interested to find out for myself if the flood zone was contemplated at least. But we don't have any mechanism to challenge the flood zone. And we don't have any room to challenge, at least as I'm reading it, we don't have any room to challenge the giant poles that are in there and the wires and really what equipment does or does not go into it. It is that is for other authorities with jurisdiction. We just don't have it. We have to stick to the design of the housing around the special use and the systems that are the special use. And our board, I think, very astutely 2 or 3 weeks ago was not satisfied with the application because certain things weren't shown. The first application we saw, you wouldn't know, for example, if there were 100-foot towers inside the wall or not. But well, now we see that. Not much we can do about it, but we also have achieved, I think, improvements in the masonry wall. They're breaking up the monolithic, adding articulation. And we can see it's about 800 feet from the wash. I think that's what one of those sections was all adding up to, about 800 feet from the wash. They're going to soften the wall with lots of landscape and trees that will bloom up or grow up. And we saw before and after pictures of other examples. Could we move the screen to the 4 or 5 different requests that we made last week, and then we can talk about if there's satisfaction on these 5 things from the board. So we did number 1, rendered information on the screening and walls and gates, signage and elements that will be visible above the wall height. So we did receive that. We did see the elements above the wall height, and there are some. We saw the signage, and a previous comment from the DRB was the signage was very obnoxious. And so now they depicted the signage. It is eye catchers all over that wall. And we heard that that's a prescriptive safety requirement. Any comments or questions or thoughts on number 1, design review board?
No, I think the information that we requested has been provided for number 1.
Grace? Okay. 2, we asked specifically that the screening wall would provide additional articulation to make it more residential and a human scale. And so before you just had like a giant block wall like the backside of a Walmart, And now it's more architecturally decorated with some vertical and elements as well. And it will be a unique, it's sort of a unique wall now. Any comments from the DRB on the wall?
I agree that it's an improvement.
Yeah. 3, information on the existing components, proposed improvements in and around the site, including the poles, transmission lines, driveways, and grading. So we did see the poles. We did see the transmission lines that prohibit landscape from putting trees directly underneath it on the far side of the substation. So now we understand why it's sort of sparse on that side, because there are transmission lines coming in that way. We've seen the driveways, and we've also seen the sections for the grading, so we could see the site. It's pretty flat, and where there are some natural banks, the banks are going to be improved with I think we saw like grouted rocks. Any DRB comment on the illustrations of the existing components and proposed improvements around the site?
I think it's been very illustrative to see the additional elements in the renderings. And I do think that a further improvement would be to have light colored equipment.
Specifically the poles.
Specifically the poles. I think that would be an improvement for the area. They wouldn't be as obtrusive.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Grace, any comment on point number 3?
Yeah, can we just want to confirm that the bank protection is in keeping with the rest of the Santa Cruz, just consistency there?
Well, are you guys doing bank protection to the Santa Cruz? Or is it just some sort of bank on your, maybe Scott, you could comment on that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I got someone's here to help if needed, but we are adding the rock slope protection along the bank, as we showed in that one simulation. And the bank protection along the Santa Cruz consists of, there's existing soil cement bank protection, as well as rock, and there's even concrete rubble that was used and stained to be more natural color. So what we're proposing is a more natural riprap, angular riprap type rock that runs along that side of the property.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Cross sections were provided in the east and west direction and the north and south direction, articulating heights of walls and surrounding grades in relation to the neighborhood and Santa Cruz River. We also saw renderings looking these ways too. And that helped, I think, the DRB understand a simulation of what was being proposed. And finally, information showing how the size of the substation cannot be reduced with safety offsets for proposed equipment. And what we heard, I think it was close to the top of the presentation, was they need adequate access around the equipment to service it with vehicles and staff to maintain all that equipment. Any questions on number 5 from the DRB?
So this one I think was more described than shown, but maybe we can make that part of our motion that we, recommend the substation be sort of the smallest footprints that it can, and rely on TEP to provide the required clearances. I don't think we can speak to that necessarily based on the drawings.
Yeah, good point. We don't know if they need 36 inches in front of a piece of equipment or 100 inches. That information is not known to us. Now, if Amanda, you could go down to the language of a motion, please. Thank you. So how does the design review board feel about the housing?
I think the housing is better. I did have a question about the landscaping, and this may not, we might not have this information, Scott, but do you guys know what trees you'll be using?
Yeah, the entire plant palette is a native plant palette. Mesquites, I think we did a native plant inventory and preservation plan as part of the co-compliance plans for the project, and we're mitigating a few trees that will be removed, but all the proposed plantings. I think in our last presentation we showed the plant palette. I think I have that slide I can show you if you're interested to see that.
Well, I was hoping that they would be natives, and preferably not the Desert Museum Palo Verdes
Yeah,
that we have a lot of problems with. And I saw in the surrounding the other substation exhibits.
Yeah, so we are using desert willow, foothills palo verde, and the native velvet mesquite, and then the larger shrubs, and some of the shrubs are hackberry, brittle-bush, creosote, wolfberry, and gray thorn, along with some succulents. We're having some saguaros, desert spoon, and some prickly pear. A lot of which were found on site. I don't think we had any saguaros on site, but we are trying to blend it in with the river park as much as possible.
That's excellent. Thank you. I don't have any other comments. I just wanted to check on the landscaping because we didn't really talk about that.
Thank you, Paige. Grace, any comments?
No further comments. I appreciate the articulation on that wall that we requested, and seeing the signage really helps us understand that human scale. I think it's fitting in better sort of with that with the renderings that we saw. So I just want to say I appreciate that.
My comment before we make a motion is the neighborhood concerns. Nobody's complained about the wall or the landscape or the sort of the housing of it. So we can't, that's what we can address is the housing. And we've done our best to improve it and kind of give a rigorous review of the housing. But we don't have any relief or any say over the matter of the use inside the housing. That is for potentially other groups. So with that in mind, would somebody from the design review board make a motion that we could recommend to the zoning examiner? I will do it because I know that even the board chair can make a motion. The design review board has reviewed the applicant's project for compliance with the special use specific standards for a utilities distribution system and finds the project in compliance with the use-specific standards set forth in UDC Section 4, 9, 11, A, 8, with the following comments that we are only reviewing the housing of the facility and not the facility and the use itself.
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Paige. I had a moment of doubt that anyone might not second that. I will call for a vote. All in favor of this motion and recommendation to the zoning examiner, say aye.
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 Any opposed on the DRB, say nay. Thank you, Design Review Board. The motion passes.
Thank you, board.
All right, next on our agenda is for any staff announcements. Maria, you were supposed to leave.
Yeah, I was just waiting for that motion, so I'll say goodbye now. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, goodbye.
Thanks, Maria.
Any other
Mr.
staff
Chair,
announcements?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have two staff announcements. Let me just pull up my notes. There's a case coming soon for the DRB review, and they would like to request a courtesy review next our next meeting, which is on the 21st of October. This project is for the new apartments. They're called Urban Street Apartments. It's the southeast corner of I-10 and Congress. And it's a 14-story building with 326 units, mostly residential, potentially mixed use. And the question for the DRB is, would you consider meeting for a courtesy review of this project if there are no other formal projects for review at that time?
Yeah, that helps us kind of, in the past, the courtesy review kind of gets us up to date on the project so that when they do apply, we have a background, basically is all it is. It's a courtesy. What do you think, Paige and Grace? Are you willing to have the DRB meet on the 21st?
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
That should be fine.
Okay. And we don't even actually need a quorum if that's all that's on the agenda. We can still have a courtesy review.
Great. Okay, we will let the applicant know. Thank you. And then the second announcement is a follow-up from our previous meeting. There was some request for additional information and background about the Sunshine Mile District and the Grant Road Improvement District. And Maria wanted to just remind everyone that she was able to send some Sunshine Mile District information in the most recent email to the DRB, and that staff is preparing a presentation on the Grant Road Improvement District for an upcoming DRB meeting. And this is to help the DRB refresh on the specifics of that special district with the anticipation of the affordable housing project on Oracle, known as the Milagro Oracle Housing Project, but it's also the motel housing project that you've probably all heard about. So that's the second announcement. I believe that's it for staff.
Great. Amanda, are you taking over? Are you going to take over for Maria? Or are you just filling in for the day?
We haven't discussed long-term. I do know that Maria has a lot of responsibilities on her plate and would like to be able to attend and listen, but not be driving the ship, so that she can attend to other business during these courses. So she'll still be around, but I do believe that the intention is to free up some of her time a little more.
Gotcha. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
I have big shoes to fill. I have no doubt in my abilities with a little bit of practice. I'll get there.
You'll get there for sure. Grace and Paige, any comments before we adjourn that you would like to be recorded and part of the official meeting?
No, thank you.
When I put it like that. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for getting to a quorum, and we'll see you next time. We're adjourned.
Great. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you, DRB members. Thank you for attending, everyone.